The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. Your grandmother had fewer choices in her entire lifetime than you'll face this afternoon. Yet she was probably happier, more certain of her place in the world, and died with fewer regrets. This isn't a coincidence. She lived in a world of constraints that forced clarity. Limited options meant clearer decisions, and social expectations provided a roadmap. You live in the age of infinite choice and infinite anxiety. This abundance we call freedom has created more psychological suffering than any generation in human history has ever experienced. Tonight, we're going back to those fundamental truths. We're going to examine 10 areas where the gap between what you've been told and what's actually true is costing you time, money, relationships, and peace of mind. By the end, you'll see your life more clearly. And with clarity comes power, the power to make decisions based on how things actually work, not how you wish they worked. Your grandmother knew these things instinctively. For us, they've become revolutionary. The comfortable lies in here. The useful truths begin now. Lesson 1. Your job doesn't care about you. The company you're loyal to is already planning your replacement. You may not want to hear this, but it's true. The business you work for, the one you've given your time, your energy, maybe even your identity, does not exist to care about you. It exists to generate profit. And in that calculation, you are not an asset. You are a cost. Corporate loyalty is a one-way street. The slogans, the mission statements, the posters in the break room, they're designed to inspire effort, not to guarantee security. Companies optimize for efficiency, for margins, for quarterly returns, not for human beings. Let's look at the numbers. In the 1950s, the average tenure at a Fortune 500 company was around 25 years. Staying with one employer was seen as normal, even expected. Fast forward to 2023, and that number has collapsed to 4.2 years. That's not cultural impatience, it's structural change. Take IBM in the 1990s. For decades, IBM promised what it called lifetime employment. People built entire lives on that promise. And then, mass layoffs. Tens of thousands of careers erased in the name of shareholder value. That wasn't betrayal in their eyes, it was strategy. The economic principle is simple. Labor is a variable cost, not a fixed one. When revenue drops, expenses must fall. And you are an expense. The human story, the birthdays, the years of service, the quiet sacrifices, doesn't show up on a balance sheet. So let me ask you, when did you last see loyalty rewarded with more than a pizza party? If your department's revenue dropped by 20% tomorrow, what would happen to you? This isn't meant to make you cynical. It's meant to make you prepared. You cannot outsource your security to a corporation. You need portable skills, the kind that transfer across industries. You need external networks, the people who know you outside your current job title. And you need a cushion, 6 months of expenses saved. Not because you plan to leave, but because one day, the choice may not be yours. Lesson 2. Meritocracy is performance art. The hardest workers in your office aren't the highest paid. They're the most exploited. You've probably been told that hard work is the road to success. But inside most organizations, success is not a pure meritocracy. It's theater. It's visibility. It's politics. The person who gets ahead isn't always the one doing the most work. It's the one who plays the stage best. The sociologist Robert K. Merton described this in 1968 with the Matthew effect. His research showed that advantage tends to accumulate. Those who already have recognition receive more recognition. Those who already have connections are offered more connections. In careers, that means the individual who's noticed early tends to rise, regardless of whether their raw competence justifies it. Consider promotion patterns in consulting firms. Studies of firms like McKinsey and BCG show that advancement correlates more strongly with sponsorship, senior leaders putting their name behind someone, than with the measurable quality of work. The brightest analyst who stays quiet can remain invisible, while a mediocre one with the right allies leaps forward. Add to this the halo effect, a well-documented cognitive bias. If you perform well on one visible project, managers unconsciously rate you higher in all categories, even those unrelated. Your brand, becomes competence, even if the reality is more complicated. So think about this. Who gets credit for your work? Is it you or the person who presents it? And when was the last time you saw true incompetence punished at the higher levels of your organization? The lesson here isn't that competence doesn't matter. It does, but only after visibility. You need to learn to market your work, not just do it. You need to build strategic relationships, the kind where someone with influence will vouch for you when decisions are made behind closed doors. And you need to document your contributions. Keep a record. Because memory fades, politics distorts, and the credit rarely falls by accident. And then there's the advice you've heard your whole life, the one that sounds the noblest, but is often the most dangerous. Lesson 3. Your passion is not your purpose. Following your passion is advice for people who don't need to pay rent. You've been told to chase your dreams, to find what you love and do it forever. But passion doesn't pay the bills. At least, not reliably. The passion economy that you see on social media, the coaches, the influencers, the creative entrepreneurs, that world is heavily filtered. What you don't see are the failures, the instability, the thousands of people quietly returning to more practical work. Most meaningful careers don't begin with passion. They begin with competence. You grow skilled at something useful, you gain autonomy, you see impact, and passion follows. Purpose grows out of mastery, not the other way around. The gig economy makes this brutally clear. According to Pew Research, over 60% of gig workers report income instability as their biggest stressor. Passion doesn't smooth over the fact that you may not know how much you'll make next month. Psychological research backs this up. Self-determination theory, developed by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, shows that long-term satisfaction comes from competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Passion isn't the starting point. It's the byproduct of becoming capable and respected in a field. And historically, the idea of the dream job is recent. It was marketed in the late 20th century as companies sought to blur the line between work and identity. If you believe your job is your passion, you'll accept longer hours, lower pay, and more sacrifices. Ask yourself, what are you good at right now that people actually pay for? And how much of your pursuit of passion is actually an escape from the responsibilities you don't want to face? The way forward is this: build competence first. Get good at something valuable. Become the person others can rely on, the one who can solve real problems. From that foundation, passion often emerges naturally because mastery breeds meaning. And if it doesn't, at least you'll have stability, which gives you the freedom to pursue passion on your own terms. Lesson 4. You're already rich, you just don't know it. If you make $35,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of global income earners. That's not a motivational poster, it's a statistical reality. According to World Bank data from 2024, an annual income of $35,000 places you among the richest sliver of humanity. Think about that. If you're earning even a modest salary in a developed country, you already live better than kings of centuries past and wealthier than billions alive today. But here's the trap: you don't feel rich. Why? Because wealth isn't experienced in absolute terms. It's experienced in relative terms. And relative wealth is a cruel illusion. Take the concept of hedonic adaptation. Psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell studied this in the 1970s. They found that no matter what happens to us, winning the lottery, suffering an accident, we tend to return to a baseline level of happiness. That's because human beings quickly adapt to new conditions. The luxury car that once thrilled you becomes just a vehicle. The bigger house becomes just where you live. Modern advertising amplifies this blindness. Every social feed you scroll is filled with curated images of people with more followers, more style, more vacations, more success. And your brain, built for survival comparison in small tribes, reacts as if you're falling behind. Dissatisfaction grows, not because you lack, but because you compare. Now let's test this with history. Imagine going back just 100 years. In 1925, even wealthy families lacked antibiotics, refrigeration, air conditioning, or access to global knowledge at their fingertips. An average worker today, with a smartphone and central heating, lives with more comfort and security than industrialists of the early 20th century. Would they look at your lifestyle and see poverty or luxury beyond imagination? And yet, despite this abundance, we remain anxious. Why? Because financial worry is less about survival than status. Most of your financial anxiety isn't about whether you'll eat tomorrow. It's about where you rank. Am I keeping up with peers? Do I look successful? So let me ask you, how much of your stress comes from the basics? Food, shelter, safety, and how much comes from comparison? Here's the shift. Stop measuring wealth as income. Income is fleeting. Wealth is assets. Track your net worth, not your paycheck. And practice what I call gratitude accounting. Once a month, list the things you have that kings of history would envy. Running water, electricity, instant communication, medical access. Count your invisible luxuries. Because here's the truth. You may already be among the richest people who've ever lived. But if you can't see it, you'll live as if you're poor. Now let's move to the darker side of money, the force that robs people of freedom, not because they lack income, but because they've already spent it. Lesson 5. Debt is slavery by another name. Every monthly payment is a piece of your future self's freedom that you've already spent. Debt wears a friendly mask. It offers you the vacation now, the car now, the lifestyle now. But behind the smile, debt is a chain. Every dollar borrowed is a contract signed by your future self. And that contract doesn't just take money. It takes time, autonomy, and peace of mind. Look at the numbers. The average American household carries over $100,000 in combined debt, mortgages, car loans, student loans, credit cards. According to the Federal Reserve, debt-to-income ratios hover around 100%. That means for every dollar you earn in a year, you already owe a dollar. The future is mortgaged before it even arrives. This isn't new. Debt has always been a tool of control. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, company towns were infamous for this. Workers were paid in scrip, a kind of company currency usable only at company stores. Prices were inflated, debts piled up, and workers found themselves trapped, unable to leave, unable to save, permanently bound to their employer. Debt was the leash. Today, the leash is made of credit cards and financing contracts. The form has changed, but the mechanism is the same. Your paycheck doesn't belong to you. It belongs to lenders, sliced into monthly obligations before you even touch it. And the psychological cost is devastating. Research shows that financial stress reduces cognitive capacity by as much as 13 IQ points, the equivalent of losing an entire night of sleep. When you're worried about bills, your decision-making deteriorates. You make poorer choices, dig deeper holes, and the cycle tightens. Debt doesn't just bind your wallet, it clouds your mind. So reflect for a moment. How many hours of your future are already claimed by payments you haven't made yet? If you had no debt, no car payments, no credit cards, no loans, what would your life look like? Freedom isn't just about having money. It's about not owing it. Every debt you carry is a slice of freedom already sold. The way out isn't glamorous, but it's clear. First, calculate your financial independence date, the day when your assets can cover your living expenses. Every debt pushes that date further away. Second, attack high-interest debt like your life depends on it, because your future freedom does. Third, understand the real cost of financing. That $1,000 couch bought on credit at 20% interest could cost $2,500 by the time it's paid off. Debt promises luxury, but delivers servitude. The sooner you cut the chains, the sooner you own your time again. But freedom isn't just about escaping debt. It's about redefining what wealth even means. And that brings us to the most liberating truth of all. Lesson 6. Wealth is time, not things. A rich person isn't someone with a lot of money. It's someone whose money works harder than they do. We've been taught to measure wealth in possessions, cars, houses, designer labels. But possessions are deceptive. They may signal wealth, but they rarely create it. True wealth isn't things. True wealth is time. Think of it this way. How long could you live, at your current lifestyle, without working another day? That number is your time wealth. Someone with a flashy car and no savings might have 2 weeks. Someone with modest habits but solid investments might have 20 years. Who's truly rich? The mathematics of compound interest makes this clear. A dollar invested at 7% annual growth doubles roughly every 10 years. Money that works grows while you sleep. Possessions, on the other hand, depreciate. The $50,000 car loses value the moment you drive it off the lot. The investment grows, the possession shrinks. Studies show that people who prioritize time over money report higher life satisfaction. In 2016, researchers at the University of British Columbia surveyed thousands of adults and found that those who valued time over wealth consistently scored higher in happiness. Why? Because time is the ultimate non-renewable resource. You can lose money and earn it back. Time, once spent, is gone forever. Look at the early retirement movement, the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early. People in their 30s and 40s are retiring, not because they earned millions, but because they maximized savings, invested aggressively, and minimized possessions. They realized the point wasn't more things, it was more time. So reflect, how many years of work would your current savings buy you? And what's the time cost of your possessions, not just the purchase price, but the maintenance, the insurance, the hours you work to afford them? The application here is practical. First, calculate your time wealth, your net worth divided by annual expenses. That's how many years of freedom you own. Second, focus on assets that generate passive income, investments, businesses, intellectual property. Third, minimize possession overhead. Every new item you buy doesn't just cost money, it costs time. Wealth isn't the mansion, the car, the status. Wealth is waking up on a Tuesday and realizing the day belongs entirely to you. That is sovereignty. That is freedom. And that is what money is really for. Lesson 7. Love is not enough. Every divorce started with two people who were absolutely certain they loved each other. That's a sobering thought, isn't it? Two people, once convinced they'd found the one, standing years later in a courtroom, dividing assets and arguing over custody. If love were truly enough, this wouldn't happen. But it happens all the time. In fact, nearly half of all marriages in many Western countries end in divorce. The truth is, love, raw, emotional, intoxicating love, is only one ingredient. It may spark the connection, but it doesn't sustain it. Compatibility, timing, and shared values matter far more than intensity. The Gottman Institute, famous for decades of research on relationships, found that it's not the presence of love that predicts longevity, but patterns of behavior. Couples who manage conflict constructively, who share values, who handle stress together, those couples last. The couples who rely on, but we love each other, as their foundation often don't. Look at the data. Divorce rates vary dramatically based on education, age, and finances. Couples who marry in their early 20s, before their identities and careers are stable, have higher divorce rates. Couples facing financial strain are far more likely to split, not because they lack affection, but because stress corrodes their bond. Love doesn't pay bills. It doesn't soothe resentment when practical needs go unmet. And here's something even more challenging. Cross-cultural studies show that arranged marriages, where love is not the foundation, often report higher long-term satisfaction than purely romantic ones. Why? Because arranged marriages usually emphasize compatibility, family alignment, and values before emotions. Romantic marriages often reverse that order, leading with passion, discovering incompatibility later. So, ask yourself, what practical issues do you and your partner handle differently? Money management, conflict resolution, division of responsibilities, these day-to-day frictions matter more than romantic declarations. How do you each respond to stress? Do you withdraw, lash out, avoid? Or do you support, adapt, and cooperate? The application here is straightforward but difficult. Assess compatibility beyond attraction. Attraction fades into normalcy with time. Discuss values explicitly: children, money, religion, lifestyle, ambitions. Don't assume alignment just because you're in love. And perhaps most importantly, observe behavior under pressure. Love in calm waters is easy. Love in storms reveals the truth. Because the hard reality is this: love is necessary, but it is never enough. Now let's step beyond romance. Relationships extend into friendships too, and the people you call friends may quietly shape your destiny more than you realize. Lesson 8. Your friends are mirrors. Show me your 5 closest friends, and I'll show you your future. It sounds like a cliché, but it's one of the most measurable truths in social science. Your habits, your health, your finances, even your worldview, these are profoundly influenced by the people around you. The Framingham Heart Study, one of the longest-running health studies in history, revealed something extraordinary. Obesity, smoking, even happiness itself spread through social networks like contagions. If your friend became obese, your own risk increased by 57%. If your friend smoked, your chances of smoking rose dramatically. Even emotions, joy, sadness, proved contagious within social circles. You don't just choose habits. You catch them. Peer influence isn't subtle. Studies on workplace decision-making show that people conform to group norms even when those norms are irrational or harmful. Career advancement, too, is shaped by networks more than merit. In consulting firms, research shows promotions often follow patterns of sponsorship and visibility rather than raw performance. Who you know is not just a saying. It's a strategy. So ask yourself, what are your friends' attitudes toward money, health, and growth? Do they normalize debt, unhealthy eating, cynicism? Or do they normalize ambition, discipline, and learning? Who in your circle challenges you to be better, and who subtly drags you toward stagnation? The practical step is uncomfortable. Audit your social circle. Not everyone deserves the same access to your life. Seek mentors, not just peers. Surround yourself with those slightly ahead of you in wisdom or discipline. And limit time with toxic relationships, no matter how long the history. Familiarity doesn't equal health. Because your friends are not just companions. They are mirrors. And whether you realize it or not, they're reflecting your future back at you. But even if you choose wisely, there's another truth to confront. Most people aren't meant to like you. And that's okay. Lesson 9. Most people don't actually like you. The majority of people you interact with are neutral toward you at best, and that's perfectly normal. This may sound harsh, but it's liberating once you understand it. You're not meant to be universally liked. You're meant to be authentic, and authenticity creates division. Evolutionary anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed something called Dunbar's number, the idea that humans can only maintain about 150 stable social relationships. Beyond that, connections become shallow. Out of those, only a handful are truly deep. That means the vast majority of your daily interactions, coworkers, neighbors, acquaintances, are surface level by design. They're not meant to become deep bonds. Expecting universal approval is setting yourself up for disappointment. Think about work. How many coworkers you once saw every day are still in your life now? For most people, the number is very small. That doesn't mean those connections were fake. It means they were circumstantial. When the circumstance ended, so did the tie. Psychological research on approval seeking shows how destructive it can be. People who chase universal approval experience higher anxiety, lower self-esteem, and more inauthentic behavior. You start bending yourself into shapes to please others, diluting your identity until you're a shadow of yourself. So reflect. How much energy do you spend trying to win the affection of people who are, by nature, neutral toward you? What happens if you stop? What if you accepted that most people will remain indifferent, and that's not a failure? It's the natural order of things. Here's the application. Stop chasing breadth of approval and start cultivating depth of connection. Invest in the few who truly matter, the ones whose absence would actually wound you. Be comfortable with indifference. It's not rejection, it's reality. And practice authenticity, even when it costs popularity. Because when you stop trying to please everyone, you finally discover the relief of being yourself. But perhaps the most difficult relationship truth of all lies not in romance, or friendship, or popularity. It lies in the family you came from. Lesson 10. Your parents did their best, and it wasn't good enough. The people who shaped you most were probably the least equipped to do so. It's one of the hardest truths to face. Your parents, Those who fed you, clothed you, raised you, were often unprepared, unequipped, and carrying their own scars. Their love for you may have been real, but love is not the same as competence. They had no experience of parenting before you. It was their first time. Research on intergenerational trauma shows how unresolved pain is passed down like inheritance. A parent who grew up with neglect may struggle to provide stability. A parent scarred by poverty may instill fear around money. A parent with unhealed wounds often repeats patterns, not out of malice, but out of unconscious reenactment. Attachment theory makes this clear. Secure attachment in childhood predicts healthier adult relationships. But insecure attachment, born from inconsistent care, emotional unavailability, or outright dysfunction, creates lifelong challenges. Anxiety in love, fear of abandonment, difficulty with intimacy. These often trace back not to personal failure, but to parental limitation. The statistics are sobering. Millions of parents raise children while battling depression, anxiety, financial strain, or lack of support. They may have loved you deeply, but love doesn't cure untreated trauma, doesn't replace missing resources, doesn't erase ignorance about child development. They did their best, but often, their best wasn't enough. So ask yourself, what patterns from your childhood are you still playing out? Are you repeating your parents' fears, their coping mechanisms, their unspoken rules? How did their unmet needs shape the way they parented you? The application here is perhaps the most important of all. First, separate love from competence. You can honor their intentions without excusing their failures. Second, seek therapy or deep reflection for the patterns you inherited. You cannot break what you refuse to name. And third, break cycles consciously. If you one day parent, or if you mentor, do so with awareness that you are carrying forward more than just your own choices. You're carrying echoes of generations. Your parents were human. They carried wounds, and some of those wounds became yours. But acknowledging that truth doesn't dishonor them. It frees you to step beyond them. Lesson 11. You're already dying. Your body started aging the moment you were born. Everything after 25 is managed decline. It sounds harsh, but it's the truth most of us avoid. The human body, for all its brilliance, is a self-decaying machine. From the moment you reach physical maturity, the slow process of breakdown begins. It's not a tragedy, it's biology. Research in cellular aging shows that each time your cells divide, the protective caps on your DNA, called telomeres, shorten. Imagine the tips of shoelaces fraying over time. Eventually, that fraying leads to mistakes, to deterioration, to decline. Studies show that by your mid-20s, your body's repair systems begin falling behind. Small inefficiencies accumulate into what we call aging. Statistically, your performance curve is already behind you. Athletes peak in their 20s. By your 30s, muscle mass starts to slip. By your 40s, recovery slows. By your 50s, the risks for chronic illnesses multiply. Every decade, another function declines: lung capacity, bone density, memory retention. And yet, most of us live as though our body is infinite, as though time will pause just because we refuse to notice it passing. But here's the paradox. When you accept decline as inevitable, you begin to make peace with it. Instead of denial, you can move into maintenance. Instead of chasing youth, you can prioritize longevity. Ask yourself, what will your body be like in 20 years if you change nothing? Will your joints ache, your heart strain, your energy shrink? Or will you age with dignity, with strength, with resilience? Too many people tie their worth to appearance, tight skin, thick hair, a number on the scale. But these are illusions. What really matters is mobility, independence, vitality. You don't need to look 25. You need to still climb stairs at 80, to still carry groceries, to still walk without pain. The practical shift is simple but profound. Stop thinking about how your body looks today and start investing in the body your 80-year-old self will inhabit. Build strength not for vanity, but for survival. Stretch not to appear flexible, but to prevent falls. Eat not to sculpt abs, but to preserve energy. Aging is not a battle you win. It's a process you learn to manage gracefully. And when you accept that you are, in fact, already dying, you stop wasting energy on denial and start living fully in the time you still have. Lesson 12. Your brain is not your friend. The same brain that kept your ancestors alive is now sabotaging your modern life. Your mind is brilliant, but it's also a trickster. It evolved in a world of scarcity and predators. It was designed for survival, not for truth, not for happiness, not for clarity. Psychologists Kahneman and Tversky showed in their research that the brain runs on shortcuts, biases that once protected us, but now mislead us. For example, the availability bias makes us fear airplane crashes more than heart disease, even though heart disease kills infinitely more. Why? Because dramatic images stick in memory, while slow killers don't. The brain favors vividness over accuracy. Then there's loss aversion. The fact that losing $100 hurts more than gaining $100 feels good. This once helped our ancestors cling to scarce resources. But today, it makes us risk-averse, afraid to invest, afraid to change, afraid to let go. Evolutionary psychology reveals more traps. Your ancestors craved sugar and fat because calories were rare. Today, that craving translates into obesity, diabetes, and disease. Your ancestors distrusted outsiders because strangers once meant danger. Today, that instinct becomes prejudice and division. The same brain that once kept you alive now quietly undermines your health, your decisions, your peace. So ask yourself, when was the last time your emotions led you to a bad decision? Did anger make you send a message you regretted? Did fear make you miss an opportunity? Did desire pull you into debt or regret? The problem isn't that you're weak, it's that you're human. Your brain is wired for a world that no longer exists. And unless you learn to manage it, it will keep running outdated survival scripts. The practical solution is not to eliminate bias. That's impossible. It's to learn your personal patterns. Notice how you distort reality. Do you catastrophize? Do you avoid conflict at any cost? Do you overestimate how much people are thinking about you? Once you know your patterns, you can build systems. Use frameworks for decisions, pros and cons lists, delayed choices, seeking outside perspectives. Question your first emotional reaction. Is it instinct or insight? Is it fear talking or truth? Your brain is not your enemy, but it is not your friend either. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can harm or help depending on how consciously you use it. Lesson 13. Happiness is not the goal. The pursuit of happiness is making you miserable. We live in a culture obsessed with happiness. Every advertisement promises it. Every social feed displays it. Every self-help book claims to unlock it. But happiness, when treated as a destination, becomes a treadmill. You run, you chase, you achieve, and then you adapt. The joy fades, and you need another hit, another purchase, another achievement. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. You get the job you dreamed of, the car you wanted, the relationship you longed for, and within months, maybe weeks, it becomes your new normal. The satisfaction evaporates, and you're back where you started, restless, unsatisfied, hungry for more. Research shows that what sustains well-being isn't happiness, but meaning. Hedonic well-being, pleasure, comfort, joy, is shallow and fleeting. Eudaimonic well-being, engagement, purpose, growth, lasts. People who endure suffering for the sake of meaning often report deeper satisfaction than those who avoid difficulty altogether. Soldiers speak of camaraderie in war. Survivors of loss speak of newfound clarity. Struggle, paradoxically, produces strength. So ask yourself, what difficulties in your life have led to growth? Think about the heartbreak that deepened your empathy, the failure that sharpened your discipline, the illness that made you grateful for health. Your most meaningful moments often emerge from pain, not from pleasure. The pursuit of happiness makes you fragile because any discomfort feels like failure. The pursuit of meaning makes you resilient because discomfort becomes part of the process. Practically, this means shifting your metrics. Don't ask, am I happy? Ask, am I growing? Am I serving? Am I building something that matters? Seek engagement over ease. Seek contribution over consumption. Seek challenge over comfort. Happiness is not the goal. Growth is. Meaning is. Fulfillment is. And the irony is, when you stop chasing happiness directly, you stumble into moments of genuine joy along the way. Lesson 14. Status is your master. Every decision you make is a status decision, whether you admit it or not. You might believe your choices are rational, practical, or purely personal. But peel back the layers, and you'll find that almost everything you do, from the clothes you wear, to the car you drive, to the career you chase, is a negotiation with status. Humans are status-seeking animals. This isn't a modern flaw. It's an evolutionary truth. In early tribes, higher status meant more resources, more mates, more security. Lower status meant vulnerability, scarcity, and risk. The human brain evolved to care deeply, sometimes obsessively, about where it stands in the pecking order. Evolutionary psychology shows that hierarchies are universal. Even primates track status signals, grooming, food access, displays of dominance. Humans just built more complex versions. Instead of chest beating, we use fashion, titles, possessions, and networks. Consumer behavior research confirms it. Many purchases aren't about utility, but about relative positioning. Economists call these positional goods, things whose value comes not from their function, but from the fact that others don't have them. A luxury car still drives you from point A to point B. What you're really buying is prestige. Designer clothes cover your body no better than cheaper ones, but they whisper a different social story. Sociologist Alain de Botton calls this status anxiety, the chronic stress of worrying about where you stand compared to others. And it's not limited to wealth. People signal status through intellect, taste, morality, even humility. Think about the person who constantly reminds you they don't care about brands. That, too, is a status move, just inverted. So ask yourself, what do you own primarily to signal your position? That handbag, that gadget, that watch, that car, how much of it was for you? And how much was for others' eyes? And more importantly, how much of your stress comes from comparison? Not from hunger, not from danger, but from feeling behind. Behind a friend who bought a house. Behind a sibling with a better career. Behind strangers on Instagram who seem endlessly richer, prettier, or happier. The practical lesson isn't to deny your status drive. That's impossible. It's hardwired. The trick is to see it clearly and choose your status games consciously. Ask yourself, what ladder am I climbing, and who built it? If you're playing a game you don't believe in, competing for cars you don't care about, jobs you don't enjoy, approval you don't respect, you're enslaved to status. But when you pick your own metrics, curiosity, creativity, kindness, mastery, you free yourself from games that drain you. Status is your master when you deny it. It becomes your servant when you face it. Lesson 15. Authenticity is performance. The most authentic thing about you might be your willingness to perform authenticity. We love the idea of the authentic self, the unfiltered version, the raw truth, the real me. But here's the uncomfortable reality. There is no single, unchanging real you. What we call authenticity is itself a performance, just one curated mask among many. Sociologist Irving Goffman described life as theater. We are all actors, and every social interaction is a performance. At work, you play the professional. With friends, you play the confidant. With family, you play the dutiful child, the protective sibling, the reliable parent. None of these is false, but none is complete, either. Consider code switching. People shifting their speech, tone, or behavior depending on context. Research shows this is not deception, it's adaptation. It's how humans survive and thrive in diverse environments. Online, the performance expands. Filtered selfies, carefully written captions, curated posts. Offline, we perform too. Our clothes, body language, even silence are all part of the script. Studies comparing online and offline personalities show overlap, but also divergence. People emphasize different traits in different spaces. Which version is authentic? The truth is, all of them and none of them. Identity is less about discovery than about creation. So ask yourself, how does your personality change in different contexts? Do you speak differently at work than at home? Do you joke more with friends, but act serious with strangers? Do you soften your accent, adjust your vocabulary, or hide your opinions depending on who's listening? And ask, what aspects of yourself do you hide, and why? Is it fear of judgment? Is it strategy? Is it care? Often, what we conceal says as much about us as what we show. The practical move isn't to reject performance, but to embrace it consciously. Instead of pretending, authenticity is about stripping away all masks. Realize it's about wearing the right ones with integrity. You can't show every version of yourself at once, but you can choose personas that align with your core values. Authenticity, then, isn't about blurting every thought or rejecting adaptation. It's about consistency of principle across contexts. At work you may be polished, at home you may be relaxed, online you may be witty, but across all, you hold to your deeper values: honesty, kindness, courage, curiosity. Authenticity is not the absence of performance. It's the art of performing with integrity. Lesson 16. Nobody thinks about you. You are the main character of exactly one story, your own. We walk through life as though the world is watching, as though every mistake, every flaw, every awkward stumble is being recorded and replayed in the minds of others. But here's the truth. Nobody thinks about you as much as you think they do. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect. Research by Thomas Gilovich shows that people dramatically overestimate how much others notice their behavior. In one study, participants wore an embarrassing t-shirt into a room and guessed that half the group noticed it. In reality, less than a quarter did. We are each so wrapped in our own concerns that we have little mental space to track others. Memory research backs this up. Even when people notice your slip-ups, they rarely remember them. Think about it. How often do you recall someone else's embarrassing moment? That colleague who tripped, that classmate who misspoke. Did you think about it yesterday? Probably not, because you were too busy thinking about yourself. And yet, fear of others' opinions shapes our lives. We hold back ideas, avoid risks, stay silent, all because of imaginary spotlights. We confuse temporary attention with permanent judgment. So ask yourself, what would you do if you knew no one was watching? Would you start that project? Wear that outfit? Speak your truth? How much of your potential is locked away because of a fear that others simply don't have the time or interest to validate? The practical shift is liberating. When you stop assuming everyone is watching, you reduce social anxiety. You become braver, freer, more experimental. You say yes to opportunities. You take risks that matter. You focus on your growth instead of curating your image. This doesn't mean you become careless or disrespectful. It means you calibrate your choices to your own standards, not to an imagined jury. The crowd is not scrutinizing you. It's too busy scrutinizing itself. You are the protagonist of your story, but in everyone else's story, you're a passing character, background, not foreground. And that's not a tragedy. It's freedom. Lesson 17. Time is all you have. You have approximately 700,000 hours of conscious life. How many have you already wasted? Pause for a moment. Imagine those hours as a bank account. Every day you wake up, another 24 are withdrawn. No refunds, no replacements, no extensions. Time is the only resource you cannot earn back. Money, possessions, even health can sometimes be recovered. Time, once gone, is gone forever. Actuarial life tables estimate that the average human lifespan hovers around 76 to 82 years, depending on gender and geography. That translates to roughly 28,000 days. Around 700,000 waking hours if you're fortunate. If you're in your 30s, you've already spent close to 250,000 of them. And how many of those were spent deliberately versus carelessly drifting? Research on time perception shows that humans are notoriously bad at recognizing the scarcity of hours. Psychologists like John Robinson, who studied how people perceive time use, found that those who say they're time poor often have more discretionary hours than they realize. The problem isn't just lack of time, it's lack of time consciousness. Consider the classic 168-hour framework. That's how many hours you have in a week. Subtract 56 for sleep, 40 for work, maybe 10 for commuting. That leaves you with 62 discretionary hours. more than 2 full days. And yet, most people say they don't have time to read, exercise, call loved ones, or pursue meaningful work. Where does it all go? To distractions, to obligations that aren't obligations, to numbing habits that dissolve the hours without memory. So ask yourself, how do you currently spend your 168 weekly hours? Write it down honestly, and you may be startled. How much of it goes to scrolling, to passive consumption, to routines that add no value? And then, what activities would you eliminate if you only had 1 year left? That sharpens the lens. Suddenly, the petty arguments, the pointless meetings, the doom scrolling, the procrastination, all of it looks absurd in the face of mortality. The practical path is simple but radical. Treat time like money. Track it, account for it, invest it in things that compound. Eliminate waste ruthlessly. Choose high-impact activities, building skills, nurturing relationships, maintaining health. The measure of your life will not be the hours you had. It will be what you exchange them for. You are rich with time only once. Spend it with intention. Lesson 18. Your peak years are behind you. Your physical peak was at 25. Your cognitive peak was at 35. What are you optimizing for now? This is one of the hardest truths to accept. We like to imagine ourselves always improving, always climbing upward. But biology doesn't play along. The human body and brain are not designed for endless ascent. They peak, and then they decline. The game is not eternal growth, it's graceful transition. Athletic research shows the physical peak for most sports occurs between 23 and 27 years old. Sprint speed, maximum oxygen uptake, reaction time, all crest around this period and begin to decline shortly after. You can maintain, you can slow the drop, but you cannot reverse it. Cognitive abilities tell a similar story, though the curve is gentler. Research by psychologist Timothy Salthouse shows that raw processing speed, memory recall, and problem-solving peak in the late 20s to mid-30s. After that, decline is gradual but steady. By 50, certain mental tasks that once felt effortless require more effort. By 70, the difference is undeniable. And yet, it's not all loss. Studies on career trajectories reveal something crucial. While raw speed declines, wisdom, pattern recognition, emotional regulation, and judgment increase. Nobel Prize. Winning scientists often make their breakthrough discoveries in their 30s, but great statesmen, novelists, and leaders often produce their finest work much later in life. The brain may lose speed, but it gains strategy. So ask yourself, what abilities are you still trying to improve that have already peaked? Are you clinging to the fantasy of athletic dominance? Are you comparing your current recall speed to your 25-year-old self? And more importantly, what new capacities could you develop instead? Could you trade speed for depth? Replace stamina with strategy? Replace brute force with influence, mentorship, or creative mastery? The practical shift is not to deny decline, but to pivot with it. If you're no longer the fastest, become the wisest. If you're no longer the strongest, become the most strategic. Use your experience to mentor others, guide teams, shape systems. Focus less on performance and more on meaning. The tragedy isn't decline, it's denial. Those who refuse to adjust waste their later decades chasing ghosts of youth. Those who accept it and reorient toward wisdom discover that some peaks are yet to come. Lesson 19. The future you is a stranger. Brain scans show you think about your future self the same way you think about strangers. This fact alone explains much of human self-sabotage. We neglect savings, we skip exercise, we delay important work, not because we're irrational, but because our brain treats our future self as someone else. Someone distant, abstract, almost fictional. Neuroscientist Hal Hirschfield's fMRI studies demonstrated this vividly. When people imagined themselves decades in the future, their brain activity mirrored the patterns seen when they thought about strangers. In contrast, imagining the present self lit up areas tied to personal identity. In other words, to your brain, you in 40 years feels as foreign as a stranger on the street. This psychological distance creates what researchers call present bias, the tendency to overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future outcomes. It's why a person will choose $50 today over $100 in a year. It's why retirement accounts are underfunded, why diets fail, why procrastination thrives. Behavioral economists have studied this extensively. People delay saving for retirement until it's too late. They ignore preventive health measures until illness strikes. They assume their older self will handle it, as though that older self isn't just them, but weaker, more tired, and less capable. So ask yourself, what would 80-year-old you thank you for doing today? Would they thank you for exercise, for savings, for relationships nurtured? Or would they curse you for debts, addictions, and regrets handed down like poisoned gifts? And ask, how can you make your future self more real? One strategy is vivid visualization. Imagine your face wrinkled, your hands slower, your breath shorter. Imagine the hospital visits, the bills, the loneliness that might come from neglect. Let it become tangible enough that choices today feel personal. The practical tools are powerful but simple. Write letters to your future self, sealing them for 5, 10, or 20 years. Use apps or images that age your face to collapse the distance. When making choices, ask, if I were doing this for someone I love deeply, would I choose differently? Because your future self is someone you should love deeply. The paradox is this: by caring for your future self, you also enrich your present. Saving reduces anxiety. Exercise boosts current energy. Meaningful work compounds into fulfillment. What serves the stranger of tomorrow strengthens the person of today. Time is a trap only if you ignore it. But if you confront it, count it, pivot with it, invest in it, you step out of the illusion of endless tomorrows. And you begin, at last, to live deliberately. Lesson 20. Pain is mandatory. Suffering is optional. Every human being, no matter where they are born or how much privilege surrounds them, will encounter pain. The hook may sound blunt. Every human experiences approximately the same amount of pain, but history, psychology, and neuroscience all confirm this reality. Pain is woven into the fabric of existence. What varies is not the quantity of pain, but the persistence of suffering. Pain has a clear biological purpose: to signal injury, loss, or threat. Suffering, however, is a story we construct around that pain, an echo chamber we keep alive through resistance, rumination, and refusal to accept reality as it is. Consider Buddhist psychology, which draws a sharp distinction between the first arrow and the second arrow. The first arrow is pain, an inevitable strike that comes from life itself. The second arrow is suffering, self-inflicted, born from our resistance to the first. You lose a relationship, that is pain. You replay the breakup in your head for months, telling yourself different stories about why it happened, what it says about you, and how unfair it was. That is suffering. Modern psychology confirms this. Susan Nolan-Hoeksema's work on rumination revealed that the act of repeatedly thinking about one's problems, without resolution, is one of the strongest predictors of depression. Neuroimaging research has even shown that the brain processes emotional pain and physical pain in overlapping networks, particularly in the anterior cingulate cortex. That's why heartbreak feels physically heavy. It shares the same neurological pathways. But unlike a broken bone, which heals in a predictable time frame, emotional wounds can be reopened endlessly by thought. Viktor Frankl, in the unimaginable setting of Nazi concentration camps, observed something profound. Though prisoners were surrounded by unimaginable pain, their degree of suffering varied. Those who found meaning, even in torment, could bear the pain with more resilience. Suffering ceases to be suffering, Frankl wrote, the moment it finds a meaning. Pause and reflect. What pain are you carrying today that is being amplified by resistance? Maybe it's the aging of your body that you can't accept, so you suffer every time you see a wrinkle. Maybe it's financial strain that turns into endless cycles of what-if scenarios. Ask yourself, how much of your suffering comes from fighting reality, and how much is simply the pain itself? Practical wisdom begins here. Acceptance meditation teaches us to witness pain without weaving a story around it. When you feel discomfort, instead of recoiling, you observe it. This is what pain feels like. By naming it without judgment, you avoid multiplying it. Another tool is to separate pain from your narrative. If your back aches, acknowledge it. There is pain in my back. Don't attach. I'll never be healthy again. My life is ruined. Finally, reduce rumination by setting boundaries with your own mind. Allow a short, deliberate window to think about a painful event, then shift attention to the present. This discipline cuts the cycle short. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is negotiable. The choice is not whether you will hurt, but whether you will carry that hurt longer than necessary. Lesson 21. Your problems are boring. Humans love to believe in the uniqueness of their suffering. When something goes wrong, the instinctive response is, "No one understands what I'm going through." It feels dignifying, as though our pain is proof of our uniqueness. But the brutal truth is this: your problems are not special. The details may differ, but the themes are ancient, universal, and endlessly recycled. Research in psychotherapy supports this point. When sessions are analyzed across cultures, languages, and even decades, the same fundamental concerns dominate: love and loss, fear and failure, mortality and meaning. Irvin Yalom, the existential psychiatrist, distilled them into what he called the four givens of existence: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. Nearly every client, in one way or another, circles these same themes. Statistics reinforce it. Anxiety disorders affect hundreds of millions worldwide. Depression touches nearly 5% of the global population at any given time. Relationship conflicts, financial stress, fear of failure, these are not exceptional burdens. They are the standard conditions of human life. When someone insists that their problems are unprecedented, it often reveals more about their ego than their circumstances. This realization is not meant to belittle suffering, but to normalize it. Imagine if you understood your anxiety not as a flaw unique to you, but as a nearly universal human experience, like hunger or fatigue. Suddenly, the shame around it dissipates. You are not broken. You are simply human. Think about this for a moment. How much energy do you spend reinforcing the idea that your struggles are unique? How often do you say, "No one understands," when in reality, millions have walked the same path? What would shift if you accepted your problems as fundamentally ordinary? The practical path is connection. Seek out communities or even literature that reveal the universality of your challenges. A young parent overwhelmed by sleepless nights might find solace in centuries of poetry and prose about the exact same struggles. A person facing financial ruin might recognize that debt crises have plagued humans since the dawn of credit itself. When you see your problems as common, you stop worshiping them as defining features of your identity. The second step is to focus less on the circumstance and more on your response. Your suffering may not be unique, but your way of handling it can be. Two people might lose their jobs. One spirals into despair. The other uses it as fuel to reinvent themselves. Uniqueness lies not in the problem, but in the art of response. Your problems are boring, but your response, that is where the story becomes interesting. Lesson 22. Comfort is the enemy of growth. If you look back at your life, every skill, every strength, every breakthrough was forged in discomfort. You learned to walk by falling. You grew strong by lifting more than you thought you could. You matured emotionally by enduring heartbreaks, rejections, and failures. And yet, despite this, we are addicted to comfort. The modern world, more than any in history, is designed to cushion us. Climate-controlled rooms, food delivered in minutes, digital entertainment eliminating boredom. It feels good in the short term, but biologically and psychologically, it comes at a cost. Biology shows us that growth requires stress. Hormesis, the principle that low doses of stressors strengthen an organism, applies from muscles to immunity. Lift weights, and your muscles micro-tear, then rebuild stronger. Expose yourself to cold, and your body adapts by improving resilience. The absence of challenge leads not to peace, but to atrophy. Psychology echoes this. Studies on post-traumatic growth reveal that many people emerge from adversity stronger, more empathetic, and more capable than before. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire, depends on challenge. When you remain in your comfort zone, those neural pathways stagnate. Civilizations, too, decline when comfort dominates. History is littered with examples. Empires that grew soft, citizens addicted to luxury, societies that collapsed under the weight of their own ease. So ask yourself, what areas of your life have become too comfortable? Maybe you haven't felt challenged at work in years, yet you stay because it's safe. Maybe your relationships are predictable, not because they're healthy, but because you avoid difficult conversations. When was the last time you did something that genuinely scared you? Not recklessly, but because it was outside your ability. The practical application here is deliberate discomfort. Regularly engage in practices that stretch you. Exercise beyond your comfort level. Take on projects that feel slightly too big. Expose yourself to environments where you don't feel competent. Even simple habits, like taking cold showers, fasting, or learning a new language, remind your body and brain that growth requires struggle. Discomfort is not punishment. It is the gym of life. Every weakness hides in your comfort zone, protected by your avoidance. Every strength waits just beyond it, demanding your courage. If you want to grow, you must learn to treat comfort not as the goal, but as the danger. Lesson 23. You control almost nothing. Of the 60,000 thoughts you'll have today, how many will you consciously choose? Most people assume that their inner world is under their command, that they think what they want to think, feel what they decide to feel, and act with deliberate choice. But the evidence tells a very different story. The majority of our mental life arises uninvited, the product of evolutionary wiring, unconscious processes, and external influences far outside our grasp. The illusion of control comforts us, but it also sets us up for anxiety and disappointment. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted experiments that shook the foundation of free will research. He found that the brain shows signs of preparing to act, known as the readiness potential, hundreds of milliseconds before a person becomes aware of their decision. In other words, by the time you think you've chosen to lift your finger, your brain has already decided. Later studies refined and extended these findings, showing that unconscious processes can predict choices several seconds before conscious awareness catches up. This suggests that much of what you call decision-making is simply narration after the fact. The conscious mind isn't the commander, it's the spokesperson, delivering press releases about events already set in motion. That alone dismantles the fantasy of control. Zoom out further. How much of your life was determined long before you had any say in it? Your genetics shaped your intelligence, temperament, and physical capacity. Your birthplace determined your language, culture, and opportunities. The socioeconomic status of your family established a starting line you didn't choose. Studies on social mobility consistently show that birth circumstances explain a significant share of life outcomes, sometimes more than personal effort. Add to that the random events that ripple through your story: accidents, chance meetings, illnesses, global economic shifts. The truth is stark, control is minimal. Psychology has long studied locus of control, the degree to which people believe they can influence events. Those with an internal locus often thrive more than those with an external one. But even here, nuance is essential. An overly internal locus can create toxic self-blame when external factors dominate outcomes. Believing you should control the uncontrollable is a recipe for chronic stress. Ask yourself, what outcomes are you currently trying to control that are outside your influence? Maybe it's someone else's opinion of you. Maybe it's whether the economy tilts in your favor. Maybe it's aging itself. How much stress in your life comes not from the events themselves, but from your desperate fight against their inevitability? The path forward is not nihilism, but recalibration. Focus on effort over outcome. You cannot control whether a job interview leads to an offer, but you can control your preparation. You cannot control whether someone loves you back, but you can control whether you approach them with honesty and kindness. Accept randomness as a permanent feature of existence rather than an error to correct. Release the compulsion to grip what cannot be held. Life is not a chessboard where you move all the pieces. At best, You are one piece, navigating a game whose rules you don't fully understand. The sooner you accept this, the lighter your existence becomes. Lesson 24. Your feelings are not facts. Your brain produces feelings the same way your stomach produces acid, as a chemical reaction, not as a revelation of truth. Yet most people live as if their feelings are accurate maps of reality. I feel scared, therefore this situation must be dangerous. I feel worthless, therefore I must be worthless. This confusion between emotion and fact creates errors in judgment, distortions in perception, and unnecessary suffering. Neuroscience shows us why. Joseph Ledoux's research on fear pathways revealed that emotional responses often arise before conscious thought. Your amygdala can trigger a fear reaction in milliseconds, faster than your cortex can process what's actually happening. That's useful for survival. If a shadow on the ground might be a snake, better to jump first and analyze later. But in modern life, this same system misfires constantly, flooding you with fear, anger, or despair in situations that don't warrant them. Antonio Damasio's work further demonstrated that emotions are integral to decision-making. People with brain damage impairing emotional processing often struggle to make even simple choices. But while emotions provide essential data, they are not reliable instructions. They tell you something is happening, not necessarily what or why. Psychology confirms the distortions. Studies on emotional reasoning show that people frequently interpret reality through the lens of their current mood. If you're anxious, neutral faces look hostile. If you're sad, neutral events feel tragic. Mood-dependent memory compounds the problem. When you're depressed, your brain retrieves more negative memories, reinforcing the cycle. Reflect on your own life. What decisions have you made based on temporary emotional states? Perhaps you quit something meaningful during a moment of frustration, only to regret it later. Perhaps you started or ended a relationship in a surge of passion or anger. How often have your feelings actually predicted the outcomes you feared? More likely, they distorted your perception, leading you astray. Practical tools help here. First, observe emotions without immediately acting on them. Notice the rising tide of anger, the wave of anxiety, the fog of sadness, and name them. I am experiencing anger. That small separation reduces identification. Second, wait 24 hours before making major decisions driven by intense feelings. Time allows the chemical storm to subside, leaving space for clarity. Third, learn to separate feeling from thinking. Write down both. I feel worthless versus the fact is I missed a deadline. The gap between the two reveals how much of your reality is simply emotional overlay. Your feelings are not facts. They are weather systems moving through the body, important to notice, foolish to worship. Treat them as data points, not directions. Listen, but don't obey. Lesson 25. Your identity is a prison. Every time you say, I am, followed by anything other than your name, you are building walls around your potential. I am shy. I am smart. I am bad with money. Each identity marker feels like truth, but in reality, it is a cage. Your identity is not an essence. It is a story you repeat until it hardens. And the more rigid that story becomes, the narrower your possibilities. Carol Dweck's research on growth versus fixed mindset makes this clear. Those with a fixed mindset believe their traits are static: intelligence, talent, personality. Those with a growth mindset view abilities as malleable through effort. The difference in outcomes is staggering. Fixed identities produce avoidance, defensiveness, and stagnation. Growth-oriented identities generate resilience, learning, and adaptation. Identity constrains behavior in subtle ways. If you define yourself as an introvert, you may decline opportunities that require social courage, even if those opportunities could enrich your life. If you cling to I'm not athletic, you might avoid exercise, locking yourself into poor health. Even positive identities can imprison you. Someone who prides themselves on being the strong one may never allow themselves to show vulnerability, cutting off authentic connection. Cross-cultural studies show that identity itself is far from universal. In collectivist societies, the self is seen as fluid and relational, shifting across contexts. In individualist cultures, identity is framed as fixed and internal. This demonstrates that what you call who I am is not an eternal truth, but a cultural artifact. Ask yourself, what aspects of your identity no longer serve you? Perhaps you still see yourself as this struggling student, even though you've long since built competence. Perhaps you define yourself by past traumas, turning them into permanent labels. How do your self-definitions limit your choices, your relationships, your capacity to evolve? The practical path is identity flexibility. Begin by noticing the words you attach after I am. Then experiment with different self-concepts. If you always say, I'm terrible with money, try on, I'm learning to manage money. If you've labeled yourself uncreative, reframe it as, I'm exploring creativity. Treat identity not as a truth to discover, but as a tool to deploy. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, emphasizes this flexibility. Don't anchor yourself to traits, anchor yourself to values. Values transcend identity labels. You don't need to be a generous person to act generously. You don't need to be a confident person to take a courageous step. When values guide you, identity loosens its grip. Your identity is not who you are, it's who you've practiced being. And practice can change. The prison door is unlocked. The question is whether you'll walk out. Lesson 26. Life has no inherent meaning. The universe is 13.8 billion years old and 93 billion light-years across. Against that scale, your entire existence is less than a rounding error. Everything you've ever thought, felt, or dreamed of is contained within a thin film of atmosphere wrapped around a speck of dust orbiting an ordinary star in a nondescript galaxy. From a cosmic perspective, your significance is indistinguishable from zero. At first, this can feel devastating. We want to believe our lives come preloaded with purpose, that the universe whispers a reason for our existence. But when you strip away the myths, there's nothing written in the stars about why you're here. The absence of inherent meaning, however, is not a flaw, it's freedom. If meaning were fixed, imposed from the outside, your role would be predetermined. You'd simply follow instructions. The void exists so that you can fill it. Existentialist philosophers understood this. Albert Camus declared life absurd because the human hunger for meaning collides with the universe's silence. Sartre took it further. Existence precedes essence, meaning you aren't born with a purpose, you define it. Simone de Beauvoir argued that creating meaning is both a responsibility and an act of liberation. You are condemned to freedom, which is both the burden and the gift. Modern psychology echoes this. Research on meaning-making shows that people who craft their own narratives, whether through family, work, art, or service, report higher well-being than those waiting for purpose to reveal itself. Viktor Frankl, who endured Nazi concentration camps, observed that humans can survive almost anyhow if they find a why. The source of meaning is not handed down from above, but forged in the fire of experience. Astrophysics reinforces the scale of our insignificance. Stars are born, explode, and collapse without any regard for human affairs. Galaxies collide, black holes devour, the cosmos expands. None of it cares about your promotions, heartbreaks, or dinner plans. But paradoxically, this insignificance frees you. If the universe doesn't care, then you are not constrained by cosmic dictates. You are free to decide what matters. Reflect for a moment. What meaning have you been waiting to discover as if it were buried treasure? Perhaps you've hoped a career path would reveal it. Or maybe you thought the right relationship would hand you the missing piece. But meaning isn't hidden, it's constructed. And once you accept the absence of inherent purpose, you gain ultimate responsibility. The practical step is to choose your values consciously. If you decide that kindness matters, then act with kindness, and your life takes on that shape. If you value curiosity, commit to exploration, and your days become meaningful through discovery. Meaning arises not from external decree, but from sustained commitment to self-chosen values. The void isn't a problem to solve, it's a canvas to paint on. Lesson 27. Success won't make you happy. Every goal you achieve will feel smaller once you reach it than it did while you were chasing it. Think of the last major achievement in your life. Perhaps you graduated, landed a job, bought a house, or reached a financial milestone. Did it feel as big as you imagined it would? Or did the glow fade quickly, leaving you hungry for the next target? This cycle is not failure, it's human psychology. Researchers call it hedonic adaptation. Humans have a remarkable capacity to return to baseline happiness levels regardless of circumstances. Studies of lottery winners show that within a year, their happiness often reverts to pre-winning levels. Likewise, people who endure accidents or illnesses often return to their baseline mood over time. We adapt upward and downward, recalibrating our expectations constantly. This explains why success rarely provides lasting fulfillment. The thrill of a promotion lasts weeks, then normalizes into routine. The new car shines for a month before it feels ordinary. The big move excites for a season, then becomes just another backdrop. Your brain is wired to keep chasing, never fully satisfied. Depression rates among high achievers tell the same story. Olympic athletes, CEOs, and entertainers often crash emotionally after reaching the pinnacle of success. They assumed the summit would deliver permanent joy, only to find it eerily empty. Once the climb is over, there's nothing left to chase, and the void becomes unbearable. Goal-setting theory highlights the real function of goals. They aren't about the reward at the end, but about structuring action and creating momentum. Intrinsic motivation, pursuing goals for growth, curiosity, or passion, consistently produces more satisfaction than extrinsic goals like wealth or fame. Success is not a destination, but a vehicle for engagement. Ask yourself, what achievements left you unexpectedly empty? Perhaps finishing school didn't erase your insecurities. Perhaps reaching a financial milestone didn't remove your fears. How much happiness are you postponing until you cross the next imaginary finish line? Once I have X, then I'll be happy. But X never delivers. The application is to focus on process over outcome. Learn to find meaning in effort, not in arrival. Enjoy the practice, the improvement, the daily work, because that's where life actually unfolds. If you set goals, let them be intrinsically motivated, growth, contribution, mastery. Success won't make you happy, but living aligned with values will. Happiness comes not from standing on summits, but from the climb itself. The joy is in the striving, the creating, the becoming, not in the final checkmark. Lesson 28. You are responsible for everything. Even if it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because the human instinct is to look outward for blame. When things go wrong, we want someone to point to: a negligent boss, an unfair system, a toxic partner, bad luck. And yes, much of what happens is not your fault. But fault and responsibility are not the same. Existentialist philosophy speaks of radical responsibility. Sartre insisted that even in the face of circumstances you didn't choose, you are responsible for your response. Frankl made the same observation in the camps. Between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space lies your freedom. To deny responsibility is to deny agency itself. Psychological research supports this. People with an internal locus of control, those who believe they influence their own outcomes, consistently perform better, cope better, and recover faster than those with an external locus. Even when circumstances are unfair, choosing responsibility leads to resilience, while blame and victimhood erode power. Therapeutic practices echo the theme. Cognitive behavioral therapy emphasizes focusing on what you can control: your thoughts, behaviors, and interpretations. Trauma therapies encourage survivors to reclaim agency by acknowledging responsibility for healing, even if they were not responsible for the harm. The message is consistent. Responsibility restores power. Reflect honestly. What areas of your life are you avoiding responsibility for? Maybe you tell yourself your financial struggles are all due to the economy, not your spending patterns. Maybe you blame your unhappiness entirely on your partner, rather than your own choices in the relationship. Maybe you cling to the story that your upbringing left you powerless, ignoring the capacity you have to change patterns now. Blaming others offers short-term relief, but it comes at the cost of long-term growth. When you say it's their fault, you also say it's out of my hands. You surrender the possibility of change. Responsibility is uncomfortable because it strips away excuses, but it is also liberating because it hands you the steering wheel. The practical application is to accept responsibility for your responses in every situation. You can't control the weather, but you can choose whether to complain or adapt. You can't control other people's behavior, but you can choose your boundaries. You can't control being wronged, but you can choose whether to carry resentment. Radical responsibility doesn't mean self-blame, it means self-empowerment. When you stop seeking others to blame, you discover that power was in your hands all along. Life will always bring unfairness, randomness, and pain, but the response is yours. And in that response lies the possibility of transformation. Lesson 29. You will be forgotten. Unless you are in the top 0.001% of human achievement, your name, your work, and even your memory will be completely gone within a century of your death. Think about the generations before you. Can you name your great-great-grandparents? Do you know what they believed, what their daily struggles were, or what dreams they carried? Unless their lives intersected with history books, their existence has already evaporated from collective memory. The same fate awaits you. History confirms this. Most once famous figures have vanished from memory. The celebrated poets of ancient Mesopotamia, once revered, are now anonymous fragments on crumbling tablets. The great generals of forgotten empires, once feared, are dust without names. Even towering figures like Aristotle or Shakespeare represent statistical anomalies, outliers preserved by luck, cultural relevance, and institutional reinforcement. The overwhelming majority of human beings, even those considered influential in their time, dissolve into obscurity. Psychologists studying terror management theory show that humans cope with the awareness of mortality by clinging to symbolic immortality through legacy, culture, or belief systems. We create stories of heaven, lineage, monuments, and memory to soften the fact that time will erase us. But when mortality becomes salient, behavior shifts. Research on mortality salience finds that when people are reminded of their death, they often become more defensive of their worldviews, but also sometimes reprioritize toward authenticity, focusing on what feels meaningful in the present rather than chasing illusions of permanence. Archaeology drives the point home. Entire civilizations have been buried, discovered only through ruins. The Mayans, the Indus Valley people, the Sumerians, once vibrant with culture and identity, now reduced to shards of pottery and inscriptions barely deciphered. These were not just individuals forgotten, but whole worlds. If civilizations collapse into anonymity, what hope does any individual have of eternal remembrance? So what happens if you accept that you will be forgotten? For many, it is terrifying, stripping away the illusion that a permanent mark can be left on time. But paradoxically, this acceptance brings freedom. If the pressure to be remembered is an illusion, then you can live without the burden of legacy. The question shifts from, how do I secure a name in history, to how do I live well now, in the brief window I'm given? Ask yourself, how does knowing you'll be forgotten change your priorities? Would you waste less time performing for an imaginary audience of future admirers? Would you live more boldly, knowing that the judgment of others will fade as quickly as your own? What would you do if legacy didn't matter at all? The practical response is simple. Focus on present impact rather than future fame. Value the process over the outcome. Find meaning in the temporary, not in the illusion of permanence. Love fully, create joyfully, act with integrity, not because it will be remembered, but because it matters now. You will be forgotten, and that is your liberation. Lesson 30. Most advice is wrong for you. Generic advice is specifically useless. What works wonders for one person can be disastrous for another. Yet our culture is saturated with motivational slogans, self-help formulas, and universal prescriptions. Wake up at 5 a.m. Quit your job and follow your passion. Grind relentlessly until success comes. The unspoken assumption is that there is a single formula for living well. But the truth is, context is everything. Psychological research makes this clear. Personality differences profoundly influence which strategies work. An extrovert may thrive in constant networking environments, while an introvert finds the same environment draining and counterproductive. People high in conscientiousness may benefit from rigid routines, while those high in openness may suffocate under the same rules. The Big Five personality model shows how deeply these individual differences run, and yet mainstream advice ignores them. Survivorship bias also skews advice. We hear the stories of billionaires who dropped out of college and built empires, but not the millions who dropped out and failed. The advice of just take risks often comes from those who happen to succeed, not from the silent graveyard of attempts that didn't. Advice built on survivorship bias encourages people to mimic strategies without accounting for luck, privilege, or hidden variables. Context further complicates things. Advice that works in Silicon Valley may not work in rural India. Strategies for wealth in a booming economy fail during recessions. Parenting styles effective in one culture may harm children in another. The environment shapes outcomes as much as effort, yet general advice treats life as context-free. Reflect personally. What popular advice have you tried that backfired? Maybe someone told you to hustle relentlessly, and you burned out instead of thriving. Maybe you followed a diet trend and wrecked your health. Maybe you applied a productivity system that made you more anxious instead of efficient. How are your circumstances unique in ways that generic formulas ignore? The practical application is to treat advice as an experiment, not a commandment. Test strategies in small doses. Observe what works for your personality, your circumstances, your values. Discard what fails without shame, even if it worked for others. Keep your own data. Trust your experience more than someone else's story. Wisdom is not about collecting universal answers, but about tailoring approaches to your own life. Most advice is wrong for you because it wasn't designed with you in mind. And that's fine. You don't need universal truths. You need methods that match your unique psychology, your environment, and your goals. Life isn't solved by copying. It's solved by customizing. Lesson 31. The only way out is through. Every path of avoidance leads back to the very thing you are trying to escape. When you refuse to confront fear, pain, or conflict, it doesn't disappear. It festers, grows, and eventually returns stronger. Avoidance feels comforting in the short term, but it compounds problems in the long term. The only way out is through. Research on experiential avoidance shows that people who chronically avoid difficult emotions, memories, or situations tend to experience worse mental health outcomes, not better. Anxiety becomes stronger when avoided. Trauma deepens when unprocessed. Conflict grows more toxic when suppressed. The act of evasion fuels the very suffering it seeks to prevent. Exposure therapy demonstrates the opposite principle. When patients with phobias or PTSD gradually confront the feared object or memory, their distress decreases over time. By moving through discomfort, the brain learns that the threat is survivable. Avoidance teaches the brain that the fear is too big to face. Confrontation teaches the brain that it can be endured. The same applies to practical problems. Avoiding financial issues makes debt compound. Avoiding health symptoms makes conditions worsen. Avoiding difficult conversations corrodes relationships. Avoidance delays the pain, but magnifies the cost. Gestalt therapy's paradoxical theory of change explains why. Change doesn't occur by trying to become something else. It occurs by fully experiencing where you are. Avoidance keeps you stuck in resistance. Engagement creates movement. Transformation begins only when you face the thing directly. Ask yourself, what are you currently avoiding that's silently getting worse? A medical checkup you've been putting off? A conversation with your partner you fear will spark conflict? A project you procrastinate on because failure feels unbearable? How has avoidance served you in the short term, and how has it limited you in the long term? The practical step is to identify avoidance patterns and practice gradual exposure to them. Start small. Confront discomfort incrementally, building tolerance. Learn to sit with unease rather than fleeing it. Each time you face what you've been avoiding, you weaken its hold over you. Each step through builds resilience, confidence, and peace. The path of avoidance circles endlessly back to suffering. The path of confrontation leads forward. Pain is not escaped by detour, it is dissolved by passage. The only way out, always, is through.